Hi, I want to talk to you about interviewing people. There's a couple different things about this I want to talk about. One of the first things is anytime you interview somebody, um, you need to keep a couple things in mind. I mean, sometimes you'll interview people in person. For example, you'll just walk up to somebody and you'll interview them. Sometimes you'll call them on the phone, and sometimes you'll be asking them questions that are fairly innocuous. But one of the first things you always do whenever you um, approach somebody is you always want to make sure it's clear that they know that you are with the media and you are going to be interviewing them. So usually what you do is anytime you walk up to somebody, you walk up and you say hi, and you maybe offer your hand and you say, "My name is Tim McKenzie, and I'm a reporter with the Lamp, and I was going to see if I could ask you a few questions regarding blankety blank," right? Now if you're doing like with a public official or you're calling somebody like that, usually you give them a little bit of heads up. You say, "Do you have time? I need to ask a couple questions." You can be a little bit more informal, especially if you have a relationship with them. But the key is you do need to, whenever you call them, you know, give them the opportunity to do it, and then to say no, or to know who you are. That way they can't claim later that you didn't tell them, they didn't realize it was an interview. I mean, this was an issue recently with the Trump White House, that the guy at Breitbart, who got fired from the White House. Crumb, I forgot his name offhand, but anyway, he basically, um, here's a guy who owns a media company, has been working in communications essentially, fairly, well versed. And a reporter called him, and he did an interview on the phone. Then afterwards, he said, "Well, I didn't even know I was on the record. I was just talking with somebody I knew." He knew what was going on, I would say, but the case is in that case, there might be, if this guy called up and didn't make it clear that we were in the middle of an interview, then there is perhaps a problem, right? Now, anytime I want to make clear though that anytime you're like at an official event, like if you're at a city hall meeting or something else, they can't come along later and say, "Well, no, that was off the record." If they're saying it in an open meeting or a public forum, that is on the record and there's no question about it. But you should always, whenever you call people, approach them. Sometimes you have to walk up to people. You always want to make sure they know who you are and what you're with. As an example of people who maybe the idea of a public meeting, it's on the record. I'm going to talk more about on the record, off the record later. But public meetings are always on the record. I want to just be clear about that. If somebody stands up at a public meeting and says something, that is public record. There's no expectation of privacy. They're speaking to a public forum. You're part of the public. What you hear is what you hear. You have every right to report that. They can't come along and tell you later. No. As just an example, that sometimes people will say stuff and they go, "Well, I don't want that in the paper." Well, then maybe don't say it. That's kind of just the easiest way to avoid it being in the paper. But like as an example, my my former wife's father was a reporter for a small paper in southern Indiana, and he was the editor of this paper. And one time he went out to some t-ball event, and the mayor came, and he was like, "I got a big announcement." And he announced that they filmed the movie. They were going to be filming the movie, A League of Their Own, about female baseball players in the hometown in Huntingburg. That was one of the places they were going to be shooting it. They shot a couple other places in southern Indiana. And he said, "I just talked to the film producers," and this is like to a group of t-ballers and their parents and stuff. And he said, "And I just talked to the producers, and Madonna has agreed to be in a Rosie O'Donnell, and Tom Hanks." He announced kind of who the cast was going to be and how he was really excited about that. And he looked back and he apparently saw Al, who was at the back, and he kind of looked at him like, "No, you can't print that." And he kind of said, "But this is off the record, right?" Now he said this in a public meeting, in a public off the record. It is on the record. There's no question that was for public consumption. He was willing to talk about it to everybody, just 'cause, you can't then take it off the record. So he took and wrote it, and he wrote the story, and ended up no, not even like the Hollywood Reporter and a lot of like entertainment things had covered this yet, and he actually broke the story before them. And so that's another thing about being a reporter that's kind of an interesting thing is reporters have a little bit of an ego. They want to be first. They want to tell the story. That's part of why you do it, is you want to be the one making a difference, telling people stuff, being the one to tell them. That's something that is exciting. I sometimes, like, even with bad news, I'm like kind of somewhat giddy about getting to tell people bad news. It's kind of a sick attribute. I admit that completely. But the case is there's something about, being the one to tell people that, you get a little bit of, that's, like, I was able to get the information, verify it, and I'm now giving you this information that nobody else was giving. And so that's that's one of the things that that is important, is getting the information, getting it correct, but getting it first is, of course, important. So the point, though, is with that story, though, is he ended up breaking it, and so then a lot of these, like, Hollywood Reporter are like, we're now learning that Tom Hanks is going to be in this movie, and they said, according to a report from the Huntingburg Press or whatever, like the newspaper was called the Huntingburg Press. And so, kind of an interesting, just, fun little thing that, he got that story, he got to be first, but it also illustrates the fact that, when somebody says something, it's on the record. But when you're walking up to people, if they don't know who you are, if they're not talking, if they're just talking and, to a group of friends, or they're just talking to some guy on the street or some girl on the street, or, whatever, that doesn't mean that they're just talking to somebody on the street. Unless they know you're a reporter, they should know it. Now, if they're standing up at a microphone in a public place, at a public forum, at which journalists can be present, one would have no expectation of privacy in those situations. But you should always approach with that introduction. Hi, my name is. Tell them who they are, and do it that way. Now, before I let you go, one of the things I was going to talk about was, we have this assignment. The assignment this week is about, it's an interviewing assignment where I give you a list of questions and you have to go out and talk to people. That talking to people is not supposed to be done through email. It's not supposed to be done through other things. It's supposed to be done in person. And the reason is I want you to actually call people and ask them questions. It's a simple question, but the way you're going to do that is, when you call them, you need to call them and say, hi, my name is, tell them your name, and just say, I'm a journalism student at Lincoln Land, or I'm a journalism student here on campus, if you're on campus, and say, I have an assignment where I have to interview people and get questions from human sources. We're not going to publish this. We're not going to do any of that, but I was going to see if I could get your name and do that. Now, one thing whenever you approach anybody is get their name early on, get them to spell it. 2 reasons. Maybe by the end of the interview, they decide they don't want to be on the record. Well, then you're kind of stuck. You don't even get their name, right? If you get their name up front, then it makes it easier. There's always an exception to that. For example, maybe if they're hesitant, maybe you'll talk to them for a few minutes, and then you'll say, hey, can I use this? And you can kind of get it on the record at that point. But usually getting their name, having them spell it, always make sure they spell it. Even if it's Smith, say, is that Smith? And then they say yes, and you go, okay. And then John, is that John? And they go, no, it's Jon. I'm actually Jonathan, but I go by John. Just do Jon. That's the kind of thing that, always spelling, even no matter how simple it is an important aspect. But that spelling, that getting their name and then spelling it, very clearly signals, this is on the record. There is no disputing this. This is on the record. And so, that's something that's very important to do, is get the name, spell it. And sometimes it's nice if you can say, hey, do you have like a phone number or something, just in case I have any follow-up questions. I wouldn't do that if I were like just out in public asking people, like at a festival, like if I went to like, the fall festival for Verdon or something. I don't even know if they have one, but if I went there and I asked a couple questions, I probably would just be done. But it never hurts to get their phone number, just in case you want to do something later or whatever. So always go up, always approach them and do that, and always do that. So as far as with this assignment, and that's kind of what I was talking about, is I want you to talk to people. You can call them. You can walk up to them. You can do any way, but I want you to talk to humans, not look at other sources. And when you do it, you need to go in and introduce yourself. Get them to give you their name, spell it, give you their title, or if they're a student or whatever first, and then proceed with the question. Make sure they're clear with this assignment, with the assignment I'm giving in this unit, in this week, that the interviewing assignment, that they don't think that you're actually going to publish it, but it's at least worth, but do make sure they know that you are a journalist, and that's part of just ethically approaching it.